Yeah, so when I was the head coach at Grand Valley, initially I was the defensive coordinator and the head coach, and then felt it was the best for the program to transition away, and I gave the actual play calling to someone else. And then when that occurred, I took over all the special teams, and so I was running all 6 units there at Grand Valley for the last 6 years. I think one of the biggest benefits of that was just the touch and connection you have with all the players at all the different positions. I think that's one thing that's unique about special teams is sometimes when you're a positional coach, you get very isolated, within your group, and you just have more touch. And so I felt it was an advantage to do that. I would say, here, that's what I've seen out of Coach Fickle so far. I've been very impressed with his involvement in special teams. This is definitely not just a one-man show. Coach Fickle is very much involved in it, and there's been some awesome meetings, and even this morning he did a great job of kind of making sure everybody understood that he was going to be intimately involved in it. And I just, from my experiences, I can see that he's doing the same thing. He's coaching not only the entire team in team meetings, but he's definitely touching a lot of players and special teams, and I think that's great. I can see the impact of that already in my time here.
You mentioned being at Grand Valley State as long as you were. Why was this opportunity the one that made you decide to move on from there? Just because you were a head coach, kind of had that program rolling like you were? Just what were some of the factors?
Yeah, there's, I think, 3 big factors. one was so much respect for Wisconsin. The athletic department and also the football program. This athletic department and football team has a ton of tradition and history. And that in combination with Madison, as being an awesome place, to go to. So that was that. Obviously, connection piece, as you guys well know, with Mike Tressel, and had never worked with Luke Fickle, but was always extremely impressed with the culture that he had in place. Whether it was the short time at Ohio State or obviously Cincinnati, and so the opportunity to be a part of that in an athletic department and a team that has this tradition in the town of Madison. It was just a lot of things lining up that I thought would be great from a professional growth and opportunity. And I'm also really relishing the opportunity right now from going from 120 players, being a head coach there, to right now my focus has kind of been the 9 outside linebackers primarily. And so just from a lot of deep relationships so far, and and there's been a lot of growth for me personally here in the last 6 weeks, and helping to try to contribute, with the roles that I'm in towards the success of Wisconsin. And the last thing I say too is that player development is something that is critical for Coach Fickle. Brady Collins and that crew down there, I'd heard a lot in the circles and seen him operate on the outside, but having been a part of this program now for 6 weeks, he's as good a strength coach there is in America. And it's been awesome to see the emphasis that's been placed here within the football program about player development and trying to get those guys to grow and develop and be the best they can be. And so that's been really refreshing to be a part of that, and that was another reason too.
Matt, you've been here for 6 weeks, as you mentioned. How do you go about kind of learning about what you have? Do you watch all of their film? Do you kind of, ask them what you think their strengths are?
Yeah, no, I watched a ton of tape. There was a period of time when I was here that wasn't on the road recruiting, and so I had the opportunity while some other coaches were on the road recruiting to basically just lock myself in the office and just watched. I first started out just watching a lot of defensive tape, and really got I think a great feel for the players that played the position. There's a lot of returning players. Nick Herbig is obviously gone, but the rest of the outside linebackers are all back. And so, a combination of that, and then I spent a lot of time with them one-on-one. So a combination of getting to know them as players on tape and then as people too, and really trying to build connection points with all those players in person. And so that process occurred right when I got here. And then that was probably the first thing was really the outside linebacker stuff, and then started to, meet with the specialists a little bit and trying to get to know those guys and a little bit from that standpoint. But it definitely was a combination of in-person and tape.
You mentioned Fickle's involvement in special teams.
Yeah.
How would you describe what the philosophy is going to be? Is it going to be, let's just be solid across the board, or is it going to be, we should be as impactful as the offense and or the defense?
No, it's definitely an area of impact, and he will have his philosophies that have starters play special teams. So you're not going to have starters that are not going to contribute to that, and the special teams will not be populated solely just with reserves. And so I think when that's the philosophical approach of the head coach, that starters are involved, and that is set from day one, that it kind of gets across the sense of urgency. We did drill work. We've done some drill work on special teams, and there is no depth chart. We're really pushing guys, even the guys that have played here at Wisconsin, to be towards the front of the lines So, I think the two coverage units, the kickoff and the punt units, those are really extensions of your defense. The two return units, kickoff return and punt return, are extensions of your offense. And so when you have that type of program, philosophically, that's the way it's represented, then it really ties in as not an independent unit. That's an independent operator that's doing its own thing. It's very much tied into the success of both our offensive and defensive units, and consequently then the overall team.
When you do start getting on the road recruiting, what is your philosophy, or what will your approach be to recruiting the position that you coach, and the message you want to relay out now that you're at Wisconsin?
Sure. I mean, I think so. We start with areas. So we all have areas that we're out and about, and what we're truly trying to do is look for the proper fit at the University of Wisconsin, and then after that, we kind of pass them off to the position coaches. So when we start taking a look at the outside linebackers, the first thing I talk about is the tradition. I used that term earlier, tradition, history of Wisconsin football, but you specifically look at the outside linebacker position, there's an immense amount of history and tradition. In fact, TJ Watt was back here on Saturday and just sitting down with the outside linebackers, some of the D-line, just chopping it up about his experiences. And so you have a transition in a coaching staff and a lot of new people, including the position coach, and you have an alum that comes back and is willing to engage even though there's been a change. I think that speaks a lot about the loyalty that alums have to this program. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is just that tradition and history with the outside linebacker position, the strengths of the defense, and then really start to get into the history and tradition of the program overall. Madison, this institution academically is very high regarded, sell to that. And then you got to start getting into the coaches and the culture. And that starts with Luke Fickell and definitely, like I talked about before, Brady Collins. I think those are two individuals that touch every player that comes into these doors every single day. And then, start getting into some of the other things. I want to make one note too. I thought something that was just, I wouldn't say surprised by, but really struck me was, there was changes in coaching staff, not only mid-season, but postseason too. And the loyalty that the current student athletes had, specifically the outside linebacker position, to this university, and really welcoming in, first starting with Coach Fickell and then me, they were really receptive. And I just want to give the players a ton of credit. And they've all to a man, as I've met with all 9 of them, even though we had two new guys, Jeff Petrowski and Jordan Mayer, came in mid-semester. But when you talk about the other 7 returners, you could sense their pride for the University of Wisconsin, their pride for Wisconsin football. And they were really all in on that transformation. There would have been, I think, at some other places with some other individuals, the potential for guys to bounce or transfer when you had a change like there was. But you didn't see a lot of that on the defensive side of the ball, especially, and at the outside linebacker position, because I think they love Wisconsin.
So along those lines of recruiting and being with the outside linebackers, I know with the old scheme being 3-4 and just Tressel talked about it a couple months ago, talking about meshing the elite of what they did at Cincinnati and what they did at Wisconsin. How is the approach recruiting outside linebackers going to change for do you feel for the defense? Yeah,
I don't know there's going to be a huge change in regards to recruiting, because we are going to be running some of the packages that were run here before. Definitely from my perspective, I have a lot of respect for Jim Leonard and Coach April and what they've done, and they're definitely there's a track record of success, and so to completely go divergent from that, I don't think is very wise, and we've talked about that. But at the same time, we've got to be us, as coaches. And there's some things they did at the University of Cincinnati to bring in. I would say, to get to specifics, our boundary outside linebacker, I don't see much difference in the profile of the type of athlete and person that has been recruited here in the past, what we're doing the forward. So, a guy like CJ Getz, who's played here, and you guys are familiar with, he really does fit what they've done and what we will continue to do. And even with the outside linebacker position, I mean, there's maybe a few subtle differences, but nothing that's really extreme or major. Those guys have got to be able to set edges in the run game, be effective as pass rushers, but they got to be able to drop in space and cover. And I think that's what really makes this a really unique position, is just I really talk about them being kind of 5-tool players, set edges, run game, rush the passer. They got to pressure inside, pressure outside, and then they got to drop into coverage. And so that's there. I also think that gives us a niche in recruiting, to be honest with you. We look for a certain individual that, we think could be more diverse than a 4-down team that's just playing a defensive end, or a team that's just dropping the guy into coverage every time. And so I think that niche in recruiting has helped Wisconsin, and I do anticipate it will help us moving forward.
You mentioned Mike Tressel, and obviously you guys go way back.
Yeah.
So what's your relationship with him like, and how do you envision working with him?
Yeah. I mean, so we coached together a long time ago at Wartburg College, and then, paths kind of split. But when I was at Grand Valley State, he was at Michigan State, both as a positional coach and the defensive coordinator. So there's a lot of professional connections that were developed along those lines. So Mike has a tremendous amount of experience at some of the highest levels, being part of the college football playoff as a defensive coordinator. And so the opportunity to work under him and, like I said, learn. And there's a lot of good defensive coaches in that room. It's not just him, but Coach Hitchler's been a part of that staff, and obviously Greg Scruggs and Paul Haynes has coached with those guys, and Luke Fickle's involved in the defense too. And so the opportunity to learn from all of them, but specifically Mike's the defensive coordinator, and I'm the outside linebacker coach. And I'm going to do my very best to try to get our room in a position that helps our defense and help him.
You said before that you did a lot of film watching and learning these guys,
Yeah.
and they haven't gotten into a film practice with them yet. Can you kind of share what you think the upside is with some of your players, especially maybe the veterans who
Yeah.
have played, whether it's CJ, Darrell, TJ, some of those guys?
Yep. CJ has a great feel for the game of football, plays with his hands extremely well, a very intelligent football player, very, very smart football player. TJ Bowlers is playing that boundary outside linebacker position, played a little bit last year as a redshirt freshman, had some reps in the bowl game. Very physical player. It's gotten off to a great start. And then, we're Jeff Petrowski, the transfer from Michigan State, is playing into the boundary too. And I can already get the sense Jeff's a highly accountable person that also has a good feel for the game of football. He's learning a little bit about dropping and being in space because he played a little bit more, like a defensive end role. So working back to the field, been really impressed with Darrell Peterson's approach. He's approaching things like a pro right now in regards to the attention to detail things, and just has absolutely been working extremely hard in trying to lead. I think we're looking for leadership overall in this defense, specifically in the outside linebacker room. Caden Johnson played a little bit, some last year, and so he is working hard to, he's a good athlete, really good athlete in space, does a really good job flipping his hips and moving around, and is learning our defensive scheme. And then, we've got some guys that are injured, which is a little frustrating. When you talk about Aaron Witt had played, you guys know, Brown, Wisconsin football, and we'll see what his status is, but he's out right now. Ross Gingler's out. Marty Stray coming back. And then we did have the one mid-year enrollee, Jordan Mayer, from Pittsburgh. And so this is a freshman that's, I love Jordan. He's doing a great job. He's drinking through a fire hose. This whole, he's got a lot of things going on. He is Pittsburgh to Madison, classes, completely new coaching staff because, he was recruited a little bit by the former staff. And so he's just really learning a lot, but he's doing a great job so far in terms of what he's doing. I really have the 9 guys, really high character people that really have just welcomed me in. I appreciate that and really attacking things. Different skill sets to your point. And I'm sure we'll continue to learn more about those when the pads come out.
Is he drowning or surviving?
He's dry. He's taking his gulps of air and he's being all right. So yeah, he's doing well though. He had a good day today.
Matt, you mentioned Jeff Petrowski being a defensive end at Michigan
Yeah.
State. Do you guys envision utilizing some of those 4-3 concepts to kind of adjust for your players?
The outside linebacker position, at times it is basically like a defensive end at a 2-point stance, and at times it's like a traditional outside linebacker. So fitting what some of Jeff has done, even though maybe he's not a 3-point and 2-point, we're still going to rush the passer. We're still going to set edges in the run game. We're going to do some things that a 4-down defensive end does. So that stuff translates well. I think what he's learning is some of the coverage pieces, whether it's dropping into zone or potentially covering tight ends or man. Those are a little bit things that he's kind of working through and learning and developing, but you can definitely see that he is comfortable with the stuff. It's a different position in some aspects, but it's the same in others, hopefully that makes sense.
You mentioned Witt.
Yeah.
I know it's early on, but he's been through a lot while he's been here. Is there any hope that he could be available for spring?
Certainly. Well, I don't know about spring. I don't know that we're going to get to the point where he's going to be able to take reps and have contact in spring. To be determined, kind of see how things go. Extremely impressed with Aaron's knowledge of the game. He is a really intelligent football player. And again, a guy that, you hope to get back because the 1 year he did play, there was some impact in that. But it's kind of to be determined and kind of see how things progress.
You mentioned the 3 big factors that kind of led you here. Did you ever vision leaving Grand Valley State for spending so much of your career there?
Yeah, I had some opportunities, but they weren't the right fit. I was at that place had championship level expectations, and they supported at a championship level. When you take a look at, you'd be surprised in regard to the facilities and the funding that was available at that spot. So there was, even some opportunities FCS, I didn't think they were better than, what I currently had. So for me, it was not about level. I was never driven about level. I was driven about being at a spot that had a chance to compete for championships and being around people, players and coaches that were high character people that I could align with. And that's the opportunity that, in my opinion, exists here is Wisconsin. This place got a chance to compete first for Big Ten West championships and Big Ten championships and hopefully beyond that. And so far, you can tell by the coaching staff and the players, you have a lot of high character people here. And when you're surrounded by that, because sometimes there's adversity, things don't go well, you don't want to be surrounded by people with low character. That's when stuff goes bad. So my decisions were always driven by that, not by level. Clearly, this is the highest level of college football, so I'm not going to deny that. But I wasn't jumping at anything, and if I would have, I wouldn't have been there for 13 years as the head coach.
Were there other FBS opportunities along the way, or mostly FCS?
Mostly, in terms of, it just depends what you're talking about. From a head coaching opportunity, it was always just FCS. I think that what Brian Kelly did, jumping from D2 to FBS, going to Central Michigan, you just don't see that very much anymore. I think there's a lot of quality, lower level coaches that could do it, in my opinion, but you're not seeing that as much as more. I think one of the factors is the NIL, the recruiting. I think a lot of athletic directors think that lower level coaches may not be able to manage that perceived jump, even though they can. The other opportunities at the FBS were probably more from a position coach standpoint, like I am currently doing here, some of those opportunities, but again, it didn't really fit in regards to relationships with people on staff and the facilities and the people and the chance to win a championship.
Matt, you have a ton of experience coaching, and there's some of the younger guys like Nate Lett and a few hoop guys. Just what do you think of the staff that you look for put together here?
Well, I think it's got a great amount of balance, a tremendous amount of balance. I mean, you have just some veteran coaches, which I think that, obviously I'm biased. I'm one of those guys, one of those veteran guys that have seen a lot, been through a lot, whether it's the recruiting and all that stuff. But at the same time, the youth is important too, just from sometimes the relationships with the players and, things that occur. I think there's a balance too in regards to several coaches that were with Coach Fickle that know the culture and the expectations and the standard with Coach Fickle, but also, brought in some different people on staff. Clearly me on defense, and then Paul Haynes, coming to the University of Minnesota. And then, offensively, you guys know about, Phil Longo and Jack Bicknell. Those are guys that had not coached with him before. So there's quite a bit of diversity in our coaching staff, and there's diversity in a lot of different areas. And I think that diversity is good because it allows you to relate to players and have, different experiences. And so I think he's done a great job assembling, just a very diverse coaching staff.